Hello, 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 and welcome everyone to another episode of Table Talk, the live stream where I just get to basically talk about games. And a clever play on word on Table Talk. Well, welcome everybody. We got London, Bill, Ben. Even Bill has managed to join us. Welcome, Bill. You never get to watch live. Yeah, we usually don't see you in the chat. Bill, welcome. Very glad to have you here. Boothby here out of curiosity. Well, that's the best reason to be here, Boothby, is for curiosity's sake. So hopefully everybody is doing well. Make sure everything here is good. Okay, great. Henry, howdy. Yeah, it's great to have you here. So, we'll get into it here in a few minutes. We'll let a couple people to come in there. There's a poll in the chat about how many of you have played Powered by the Apocalypse games, and we're going to talk about them. Oh yeah, you got the blue icon now. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Yeah, you weren't here Thursday, but we did get your notification that you automatically re-upped your membership, and you weren't here for it, Henry. So I'll give it to you now.
I am strong.
There you go.
Strong! Strong!
Cheers to the adventure. Welcome indeed all. Yeah, so we got a poll going asking if you've ever played a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I'm just kind of curious on a morbid state to kind of help me inform the nature of this Q&A. A big part of this is, like anything, is an opportunity for you all to simply ask questions. What do you want to know about Powered by the Apocalypse games? What are the things that you might be interested in from the game perspective? Questions you have about the system, how does it work? Is PbtA 5e compatible? So we're definitely going to have our hands full, but I kind of want to just do something different with these live streams. I've been talking Pathfinder 2 all week. I've got live streams. I've got a stream with Roll for Combat on Thursday. We're probably gonna be talking Pathfinder 2, change it up a little bit. The other reason I specifically wanted to talk about Powered by the Apocalypse is this year's 2022 ENNIES. If you're not familiar with the ENNIES, it's one of tabletop role-playing games' larger, more prestigious awards. Originally started by EN World back in 2000, presented annually at Gen Con. And every year they give out a variety of awards for everything from best art, best cover, best rules to best game. And this year there are 5 nominees, three of which are Powered by the Apocalypse. So, very interesting kind of, here in 2022 to see Powered by the Apocalypse coming back and being such a big part of the zeitgeist. So, again, thought it was worth talking about here. So, again, feel free to ask any questions, and and if you're enjoying the show and you want to show your support, feel free to tip. There is a link down below in the description that'll send you to our Stream Elements tip page. You can also type !tip, and that'll make the good old Stream Elements bot give you the link to our tip page. You can also go ahead and give us a super chat, but the tips will make the bar grow, and we're getting really, really close. So awesome for that. And as most of you are already members of the Patreon, I'm not going to tell you, but the Patreon's pretty cool as well. All right, well, looks like we got about 15 people. So that's probably about the highest we're going to get. Maybe we'll do a little more. Who knows? Maybe we're at 16. No, we're at 15. All right. So where to begin? Well, let's see if this works. All right. Okay. So this is a new stream that I wanted to try out here. So Apocalypse World. Where did it come from? Why is it called Powered by the Apocalypse? Well, it's called Powered by the Apocalypse because of this book right here. This is Apocalypse World by D. Vincent Baker, who usually just goes by Vincent Baker nowadays. And he wrote this book in 2010, I want to say. 2010. 2010. And this was an interesting time during the sort of spectrum of games, right? We had come out of 3rd edition. 4th edition had come out 2008-ish, and the world was in flux. We were in the heyday of the edition wars between 3rd edition and 4th edition. Pathfinder 1 was new onto the scene, and so you had this massive upheaval in the game space. Now, indie games had been sort of being kicked around on, budding internet sites like The Forge and on Usenet groups, since the late 90s and in through the 2000s. But they had always been super underground. Nobody in the mainstream, including, I would say, myself, was really paying attention to these games. I read some of the stuff on The Forge back then, which was a website dedicated to sort of indie game designers and people that we now recognize as sort of titans of the indie RPG movement were sort of just regular posters there. And, but I never really seriously took them. I was never going to give up my Dungeons and Dragons game, right, to play some strange game. So this is where Apocalypse World got its start. And Vincent Baker and his wife, Meg, released a 2nd edition. I want to say about 2015. Nice little signature. 2017, maybe, looks like. I actually had the opportunity to meet Vincent Baker at Gen Con, and we actually got to talk a lot about Apocalypse World, his thoughts on the system, his thoughts on how it worked as a game engine, why he wanted to make a 2nd edition, what he changed, and some of those things. So, what is Apocalypse World? So let's see here. We've got 80% of you, 4 and 5 of you have never actually played Apocalypse World. So that's actually really, really high. Can we have this conversation without mentioning Dogs in the Vineyard, where a lot of these ideas came from? Yeah, I mean, obviously, all these games, are inspired by other games, including other games that these folks have worked on. And, in this case, Vincent Baker had created an indie game which had come out even before Apocalypse World. I think circa 2008 or so, was mostly just a PDF that kind of floated around, or like a very stitched together paperback. And that was called Dogs in the Vineyard, which, again, used this idea of player-facing moves. 2007, thanks, Ben. Of players facing, of sort of controlling the moves in the sense, rolling the dice, a fiction-first game. And that is kind of one of the key elements of Powered by the Apocalypse game, is that it's this idea that it's fiction first. And that might not make a whole lot of sense, but what it basically means is that fiction first gaming is, thank you, Adobe Creative Cloud. It's one of the most annoying apps of all time. It always pops up. Fiction first gaming is this idea that, Ben, right. I think Dogs of the Vineyard is the first game to use the phrase "the fiction" and what it means. Yeah. And Vincent Baker took this and expanded this into Apocalypse World, which is the mechanics should not exist, right, in isolation from the fiction. The fiction should inform the mechanics. And then we engage with the mechanics, and then we go back to the fiction. So what does this mean? It basically means that we think of traditional RPGs, you don't, and I've gotten into this before on the channel, you don't need to role play. It's a role-playing game, but you don't actually need to role play. You can address the game, and you can do things in the game strictly in a mechanical sense. I can say in Pathfinder 2, for example, I am going to stride. Then I am going to stride. then I am going to strike. And that is essentially a legal sequence of moves. I am performing everything in that cycle of play strictly as a mechanical action. Now, of course, remember this, this is 14 years ago. So nowadays, I think we have come around. This sort of 5e renaissance has sort of really pushed fiction to the forefront, but it has done so without bringing along the mechanics for the ride. And again, that might not make a whole lot of sense, but what I mean to say is, in a game like Apocalypse World, you don't get to stride. You don't get to strike. In Apocalypse World, we are having a conversation. We are talking about the fiction. And whatever things that you want to do in the mechanics have to make sense in the fiction first. Now, sure, you could simply say, okay, well, I'm going to scream a battle cry and I'm going to bring my sword down upon this guy. That's the fiction. At that point, we would step in and we would say, okay, I think that this is triggering a move. This is triggering these mechanics. So we need to now roll some dice because we want to find out what's happened. We've introduced uncertainty, ambiguity, chance into the game. And now, instead of just making a decision, we are going to let the dice and the mechanics decide what is going to happen in this pivotal moment of you swinging around your sword. And then that loops back into the fiction. And that's sort of the cycle of play. So it's very different from what we normally think of. Now, granted, you might be saying, well, Derek, when I play role-playing games, I'm always describing what I'm doing. And that's great. I mean, you can do those things. I maybe even argue that you should do those things. But you don't have to do those things. And that is, I think, a big, important difference. And yes, some people could say you're being a stickler for the rules in these games. But one of the most important things is that technically, according to the game, a player is not ever allowed to just take a move. They have to do it in the fiction. In fact, the phrase that this game and a lot of other games have taken is to do it, do it. Now, again, this might sound very silly, but technically what this means is, I'll give you a great example, Bob. Bob, it's kind of become a joke, right? On our channel, on our Discord, will frequently, will swing his sword and then he'll scream out again, map attack, right? And we all laugh because it's kind of funny, right? But I think we can all agree that screaming map attack and then rolling a d20, mechanically, we all understand, right? Mechanically, we all understand what he is doing. He is making a second attack roll with a -5 penalty to his multiple attack penalty, and he is trying to strike this person with the weapon that he has equipped in his hand. That is understood mechanically. But what we don't know is what is happening in the fiction. What is happening right now? We're screaming map attack, okay? But we're not describing it in the fiction. We have turned a game of Pathfinder 2 into chess, right? Where I can move my bishop and take your knight, and that is a mechanical action. But it's like, but what happened? What was the bishop doing? How did the bishop beat the knight? And we say, well, we don't care about that, right? We just want to move the bishop and take the knight. And this idea of fiction-first gaming is this idea of trying to mechanically, in the game, codify and incentivize, and in fact require, the players to do everything that they are doing within the context of the fiction. And this will make more sense when we get into some of the other games like Dungeon World. So, what is this core mechanic in Powered by the Apocalypse? And again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll try to answer them. We'll see how this goes. If everybody leaves, I'll close the stream. So, in Apocalypse World, or in Powered by the Apocalypse type games, You're going to roll 2d6 plus your stat, which is usually going to be between -3 to +3, and it's usually going to be between -2 and +2. So most of the time you're rolling 2d6 plus 1 or 2d6 minus 2. That's it. It is not versus any sort of DC. Okay? This will make more sense when we get to this in the fiction in a second. So you're just going to roll 2d6 and you're going to add your stat. Okay? These vary from Apocalypse World, from game to game. What the stat is. A game like Dungeon World has strength, dex, int, con, wisdom, you name it, right? It's got the D&D stats. A game like Monsterhearts has stats like hot, cold. I don't even remember them all. It's been so long. Oh my gosh, come on. Hot. I don't even remember what they are. That's crazy. Hot, cold, something. Okay, here we go.
London tipped $5 for my Colk education tuition.
So Monster World has hot, cold, volatile, and dark. So these are all the different, but what is the same is this concept of did you succeed or did you miss? And in the game, if you roll 6 or less, then that is a miss. And this is very important because in Apocalypse World, we'll get to this in a second, a miss does not equal nothing. In fact, far from it. In fact, arguably, nothing can never happen in an Apocalypse World game. If we get to a point where we are rolling the dice, where we have decided, where the rules have interjected and said, hey, guess what? We need to roll the dice to find out what's going to happen. Then at that point, something is going to happen. There is no such thing as you did nothing. You rolled the dice. What happened? Nothing happened. That's just not a possibility. Everything else is considered a hit. A 7 to 9 is called a weak or a partial hit. And a 10 or higher is considered a strong hit. So, what does that mean? Well, it means you have a really good chance of getting what you want. If you get a hit, you succeeded at whatever it is that you were trying to do. If you were trying to get, if you were climbing the tower wall while people were shooting arrows at you, if you got a 7 or higher, you make it to the top of the tower. Hands down. The difference between a weak hit and a strong hit is a strong hit is you get what you asked for with sort of no questions asked, right? No questions asked. You get what you want to. You don't have to pay any additional price. If you get a weak hit, you get what you asked for. You succeed. Okay. There should be another C in there. You succeed, but there's a cost. There's a cost to your success that you have to pay. And the GM will tell you what that cost is, or the rules will tell you what that cost is. So what does this do in our purpose of our fiction? Well, what it means is you never reach, because this will happen a lot in a 5th edition game. This will happen a lot in a Pathfinder game. You'll reach a moment where you're going to roll the dice and someone rolls low. Or they might even roll high and succeed, or they roll low and they fail. And the game kind of comes to a stop. Nothing interesting is happening anymore. We sort of resolved the tension, and we don't know the game is kind of like stuck, right? Like, for example, you get to a locked door and you say, I'm going to pick the lock. And the GM says, okay, pick the lock. Roll lock picking, and you roll low, and then he says, "Okay, well, you pick the lock. You fail to pick the lock. Nothing happens. What do you do next?" And you go, "Okay, I guess I try again, or I guess we could go back the way we came." Right? There's consequences because obviously you didn't get what you wanted to accomplish, but there's this like feeling that the flow of the game just sort of reaches a stopping point. Thank you, London, by the way, for that tip. I kind of missed that. So thanks. Thank you very much for the $5. Appreciate it. 330. Good choice. We're getting up there. Okay. The lock wins. Great session, everybody. Yeah, exactly. This game system, you know, and every game system's a little bit different, but they all sort of use this basic 2d6 plus stat, is operating under a very different idea than D20 based games. In D20 based games, we are trying to simulate reality. We are trying to simulate, it's a fake reality, okay, but we are trying to simulate a reality. We are trying to say that your PC versus some challenge, okay, and your PC has a certain amount of skill or ability, and that challenge has a certain amount of difficulty, okay, compared to it. And we want to know what is our percent chance of succeeding or failing. That's it. That's what all these D20 games do. Okay? You look at your PC, you look at the challenge, you determine, we're trying to use the rules. Everything that comes into play is to try to figure out what is your percent chance to succeed or fail. It is interested in simulating the reality outside, right? If our PC has really high skill and really high ability, then we would expect for the game to simulate that I now have a very high chance of success. Similarly, if my difficulty is really high, if I'm climbing a crumbling brick stone wall versus climbing a sheer steel surface, okay, we would say, okay, well, the sheer steel surface is higher in difficulty, therefore your chance of succeeding is lower. Oh, but what if I'm really good at climbing? Okay, well, then your chance of success would go up, right? We play these games, and we go back and forth until we come up with a bonus value +5, +10 versus a DC 25. And now we know what we need to get on our D20 game roll. We roll, we either fail or we succeed. And that's it. That there is no agenda to that die roll. That die roll isn't trying to say whether or not what we're doing is going to be interesting or whether what we're doing is going to be fun. It's strictly just trying to simulate success or failure. It doesn't care. It's agnostic to what is going on in the story around us. It doesn't care that we're playing a game and that we are people and that we want a really exciting and interesting story to emerge and happen while we are playing the game. And again, that's a very kind of high level concept to understand, but it's this idea that Powered by the Apocalypse does care. It doesn't want, right? Because you know, to be completely blunt, right? If we're being honest, right? If you fail, that's kind of boring. And if you succeed, in a way, it's also kind of boring, right? I climb the wall. You fail. Okay, I guess I didn't climb the wall. I climbed the wall. Yep, you rolled high enough, you climbed the wall. Right? Like, both of those are kind of boring inside of our fictional environment. So, Apocalypse World and the Apocalypse World engine tries to circumvent that and say, okay, I want a game engine that is going to push an agenda, right? Right? And this is different. You know, we talk about this all the time. What's the agenda of this
Bill M
person?
tipped $15. TTRPG Philosophy 101 with Derek M.
Thank you, Bill M. Appreciate that. That's awesome. Yes, I mean, this is This is getting into the philosophy. This is getting into the why we play kind of question. Not just what we play, but why we play. I think it's important to understand what is it that you want out of a game. I'm not saying that Powered by the Apocalypse game is better than D20. And I'm not saying that it's going to be better for you. In fact, it might not be. It might actually be worse for you. For one, if you like miniatures and gridded combat and making sort of tactical skirmish mini games, then yeah, I mean, it's not the great game for you. Chris says, I have a counter argument to the pick lock. Yeah, for example, Chris, if you're using random encounters and someone tries to pick a lock and that eats up time, and that time causes you to have to wait there longer, which causes another random encounter roll, which could potentially derail your party, then that is definitely a consequence, right? 100%. I mean, I'm certainly not oblivious to the fact that things matter in a D20 game. I'm not trying to say that they don't. What I'm trying to say, though, is that Powered by the Apocalypse games have an agenda. They when they have a plan, they have a mission. They are trying to sneak something by you. Rivo said, "What's up, Derek? I am going to a con next week. What 3 PbtA games should I keep an eye out for from vendors?" It's a great question, Rivo. I see Ben put in a list. I don't know that you're going to find Root there, and Iron Sworn I would consider to be a cousin of Dungeon World, of Powered by the Apocalypse. There's also sort of a hierarchy. I know this sounds horrible to say. I don't want to sound like I'm gatekeeping, but each of these games has sort of built on the ones that have come before it, right? Like Apocalypse World kind of came out first, okay? And then you kind of had, I would call them like the successor games, right? Which is like Dungeon World, okay, and like Monster of the Week. And these games came out pretty early, within the first year or two, that really changed up. They changed the tone, right? Apocalypse World is about like post-apocalyptic Death World, Mad Max kind of style. And these games came in and said, okay, hey, can we use that engine and make something that is basically D&D and make something that is basically the Buffy the Vampire Slayer or like Supernatural, the TV show. Then the game came out, and for me, this is the game that really showcased or changed what Powered by the Apocalypse could be. And I actually agree with what James here says. I think it's because of PbtA is more of a that's fantastic. Thanks. The bots found us. So that's great. I love it. This is what happens when I don't have moderators in the chat. What's crazy is I don't understand how we ban them every time and they somehow still get in. Where was I saying? Oh, okay, right. Yeah, I would agree with what James was saying, which is that PbtA is more of a set of ideas than an engine, and that's very true. In fact, Vincent Baker said when he created his quote, Powered by the Apocalypse, that doesn't even necessarily mean an engine. Don't think of this like the D20 engine. It's more of inspirational ideas than strictly. And in fact, one of the things I'm getting at is the game has really, really expanded. And so if you were to start at Apocalypse World and you were to end up, at Root, you might look at these games and say, wow, we've come a long way in our time frame here. And there were a lot of steps sort of along the way to get from here to here. And I would argue that Avatar, the new one from Magpie, is kind of would be on top of Root, right? So these games have sort of built upon each other in a very collaborative way that I don't necessarily think you know, some of the D20 games have been sort of stagnant in not developing, but I think Apocalypse World really has developed and changed. But you know, these two games, if you play D&D and you look at these games are going to be weird to you, but they're going to make a lot of sense. The theme and tone of Apocalypse World can be a little bit wonky and can be a little bit weird, right? Whereas like Dungeon World is like, you know, it's basically D&D, right? You've got things like the fighter, the thief, the wizard, the cleric. You've got stats like strength and dex. You have ability scores like that go up to 18, right? So this game feels a lot more comfortable to someone who's, you know, familiar with D20. And this is like, you know, this is your X-Files, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The tone is very similar, or is very safe, I should say. But I think this was the game that for me really changed how I perceived role-playing games and what role-playing games could be. And so to that end, going all the way back to what Rivo had asked, I personally think it is not a bad idea. This is the second edition of Apocalypse World. I don't think it's a bad idea to get Apocalypse World. I think that this is a safe bet. I also don't think, and this is usually what Dungeon World looks like now. Whatchamacallit? This is very similar to this, but it's phrased in a language that if you're coming from D20 is going to be pretty safe and pretty easily understandable. There are a lot of really great Powered by the Apocalypse games between here and there. If they have it, I think Root's worth a look, but I actually... Where'd it go? I would actually take a look at this. This is also by Magpie Games, but this is Masks, and Masks, to me, was like the next big evolution of design in Powered by the Apocalypse creation. So I would probably say to get Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, and maybe Masks. And I would almost read them in that order. Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, and Masks. And I think, you know, and if you really want to get one in between, I would get Monsterhearts. Monsterhearts itself got a second edition. So this is what the Monsterhearts would look like. But I, you know, this is a fan favorite of mine, but like following this path from Apocalypse World to Dungeon World, maybe to Monsterhearts, to Masks, and then something like Root, like that's sort of taking you through the layers of the Powered by the Apocalypse cake. Okay, so anyway, sorry. I got distracted there by Mr. Rivo Grimm. James says, Monster of the Week for me is a shining golden example of PbtA. I agree. It's a really great game. Masks and Avatar Legend are my favorite so far. Yeah, Masks, really good. Griffin says, Monster of the Week, definitely. Monster Heart version 1, also very excellent. Awesome. Avatar seems like the pinnacle of where PbtA has evolved so far mechanically. And I would agree with that to a certain extent, because Magpie has really kind of been carrying the torch of the Powered by the Apocalypse game engine. And, you know, they came out where they had Urban Shadows, and actually Mark Diaz Truman, this was actually, I think, their first game. This is a Powered by the Apocalypse game that tries to, you know, all those like Armageddon, Deep Impact, Interstellar, you know, it's trying to signify the sort of like you have the, you know, Journey to the Center of the Earth, right? The Core, all these like sci-fi disaster movies, and, you know, they're your Earth's last best hope to save it. But, you know, they designed these games. They did Urban Shadows, they did Masks, then they did Root, and now they're doing Avatar. And Avatar does seem like it's pretty good. I mean, again, it's got a lot of moving parts, so... do moves force a reliance on trying to make every action fit the move structure? So yeah, so let's talk about that. So the idea here, so let's use something very simple in the fiction dungeon world, right? Because that's a language that we're more all familiar with. Okay. So the idea is that we are just going to have a conversation. We are going to talk back and forth. And at some point, the game is going to say that a move triggers. So, for example, if we look at hack and slash, okay, hack and slash here says when you attack an enemy in melee, roll plus strength. Kind of can't see that there. There we go. When you attack an enemy in melee, roll plus strength. On a 10 plus, you deal your damage to the enemy and avoid their attack. But at your option, you may do an additional d6 points of damage. Why is that focusing? There we go. Oh, apparently it cannot focus. There we go. But expose yourself to the enemy's attack. On a 7 through 9, you deal your damage to the enemy and the enemy gets attacked. Note, it says hack and slash is for attacking a prepared enemy, plain and simple. If the enemy isn't prepared for your attack, if, for example, they're helpless, restrained, that's not hack and slash. That's just murder. You're just killing them. So what does that mean? So we think of hack and slash in the dungeon world sense as being equivalent in D20 to the attack roll. And it is not. This is probably the number one mistake that people make in Powered by the Apocalypse. If you and I were playing and we describe in the fiction that your character, maybe a sneaky rogue, has moved up behind a guard. And I say, okay, great. You've done that. And you're like, I want to slit his throat. And I say, okay, great. And you go, and the player starts to reach for their dice to roll hack and slash. And I say, no, don't roll your dice. We're not hack and slashing. And he says, why? I want to attack this guard. And I go, you don't attack anybody in this game. That's not what you're doing. You're not attacking this guy. You're not hack and slashing him. You're slitting his throat. And the player will, this is where, familiarity with the game comes in. You go, okay, well, where's that move? Well, I say, well, hack and slash only triggers as a move if you are engaged in a back and forth battle between a foe on even footing, right? I've got my sword and shield. He's got a two-handed sword, and we're just going back and forth. That's hack and slash. If in the fiction that is what I'm describing, then we're going to roll hack and slash. We're going to roll hack and slash, which is 2d6 plus strength. But what you've just described is not that. And so that move will not trigger. Instead, that player will look to me, the GM, and say, well, then what does happen? And I'm probably going to say, you cut their throat. Because that's what makes sense in the fiction. The fiction comes first. That's a human being. You have a dagger, and you've just pushed it through their neck. They're dead. That's it. That's the only thing, right? Fiction comes first. Now, the game will tell us when certain things trigger moves, where there's ambiguity or where there is uncertainty. But if I need to ask myself, is someone going to die if I slit their throat? No, I don't really need that uncertainty, and I don't need to make that judgment. That's pretty clear to me. Similarly, if my fighter, with my long sword, one of the things I see a lot of times in Dungeon World is, so Domble, we'll get to that in a second. Similarly, one of the things I've seen before is, like, people complain in Dungeon World because, like, something like a dragon will have, like, 20 hit points. And, like, a fighter will do, like, D10 damage. And they're like, oh, fighter could kill a dragon or two in 2 or 3 hits. But what they're failing to understand is when hack and slash triggers. If a fighter with a longsword just goes walking up to a dragon, and starts swinging his sword, that's not hack and slash. In the fiction, hack and slash is when 2 opponents are going at it and they're on even footing. You don't get to just make an attack roll in a Powered by the Apocalypse game. We're describing the fiction. The player is describing him swinging his sword at this massive dragon. As a GM, bound by honesty, this isn't me making a call. This is the game telling me what to do. I would simply say, I would describe. The player has described what they are doing. I am going to respond as well. Remember, it's a conversation, a back and forth. The player moves in, swinging their sword, hacking at the dragon's limbs, and I say, maybe some sparks fly as you hit the creature's steel-hardened scales. It seems unaffected by your nuisance swings. And the player goes, wait, no, I'm hack and slashing. I say, no, you're not. Hack and slashing is very clearly defined as when 2 people are on even footing and they're going at each other. You are not on even footing with this dragon at all. In fact, given the situation of the fiction, there is no way that hack and slash roll is ever even going to trigger. You need the fictional power, the fictional strength, in order to overcome this. Now, let's change that situation a little bit. What if that same fighter was going in to fight the dragon, and he was wielding Stormbringer, the legendary sword of kings, destined to slay a dragon? Well, now we very clearly established in the fiction that you are on more even terms, and that when that character is going in to battle a dragon, it is not the mosquito versus the lion, right? This is a well-equipped, well-prepared individual, and maybe you are on even footing. And now maybe you are hack and slashing, because that character is in the fiction when they swayed into melee with the dragon, with the powerful sword of kings glowing in a pearlescent white aura, shedding away the dragon's fire, dispelling its frightful presence, almost withering its skin by the mere presence of its holy power. Suddenly, in the fiction, we're in a very different world. And when that fighter goes in and he starts carving through the dragon like he's carving through a steak, now we're rolling hack and slash, because the fiction has led us to that roll. And the game will dictate that, in fact, you not only can you roll hack and slash, you must roll hack and slash, because the game does not leave room for ambiguity. The game clearly states that if the move triggers, you must roll the dice. The GM doesn't get to make a decision. The player doesn't get to make a decision. If you want to go wade into battle with people on even footing, you're rolling hack and slash, whether you want to or whether the GM wants you to or not. All right, we got a bunch of people here in the chat, so let me get up on here. In PbtA, that fiction is the really real world. Ain't no coming back. It is wonderful. Bill Muscle says, does the fiction get bogged down by too many moves? That is probably the number one problem that comes up in Dungeon World. And let me give you a great example of that, Bill. So there is a move called Defy Danger. Okay?
GM Scott tipped $50. Bushido root.
Hey, GM Scott, thank you very much for the $50 tip. That's awesome. Really appreciate it. That's awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Bushido Root is coming. I so badly want to make a Legend of the Five Rings hack of Root. I think it would be so awesome. I love Root the way it is, but I also love Legend of the Five Rings. I love Samurai, and boy, it's coming, GM Scott. Definitely going to be coming. Definitely going to be going out to the patrons when it does. That is just one of the things that I am so stoked about and doing. Thank you for the very generous tip, sir. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and you make very good mead. We certainly enjoyed your batch. We haven't cracked into the Aberlore yet, but I'm sure we will here shortly. Thank you, GM Scott. Okay. Where were we at? Okay, we were talking about moves. Bill asked a question. Okay, this is the Defy danger move. It says, when you, and an exclamation point, act despite an imminent threat or you suffer a calamity, say how you deal with it and roll. If you power through it, roll plus strength. If you get out of the way by acting fast, roll plus dex. If you endure it, roll plus con. You get the picture here. If you do it with quick thinking, roll plus int. Mental fortitude plus wisdom. And if you use charm and social grace, you roll plus charisma. A common mistake that I see time and time again is people treating Powered by the Apocalypse game moves like a D20 game. Again, in D20, we are trying to simulate a reality. That wall is there. It has a certain innate difficulty to climb based on its height and the material composition of the wall and its coefficient of kinetic and static friction and the ambient humidity in the air and blah, da, 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 da. It is DC 21. And so to climb it, you need to get a 21 or higher, whether it's because you rolled high or because you rolled low, but you have a really great bonus. The game is really interested in simulating that. Apocalypse World is not. Powered by the Apocalypse World games are not interested in simulating that. If you climb a wall, even a really high wall in Apocalypse World, most of the time you're probably not making any sort of check. And one of the mistakes that people will make a lot is they will look at that Defy Danger move and they will say, oh, okay, roll Defy Danger, roll Defy Danger, roll Defy Danger. Oh, you're doing something? Roll Defy Danger, roll Defy Danger. Why? Because they're used to making a roll every time anything happens in a D&D game. But the game is very specific. It says when you act despite an imminent threat or when you suffer a calamity. So what is an imminent threat? Okay, my character is climbing a wall and suddenly there is an avalanche overhead and stones and rocks come tumbling down. Now we're exciting. Now, in a movie sense, something is happening. Apocalypse World and the games like it ask you to think as a GM more about being almost like a film director than a referee. We don't care about climbing up something, even if it's a difficult climb, if there's really nothing inherently exciting about it. But when something exciting does enter into the equation and suddenly you're climbing the wall to escape a shower of arrows as the king's guards shoot at you as you try to escape before you get over the wall, now that's more interesting. Now you are acting despite an imminent threat. How are you acting? You are climbing the wall to escape a hail of arrows. Okay, now we're talking. Now we're going to roll. The mundane stuff, even the difficult, there's an innate desire when you've been playing D20 for a long time to say, this is difficult, it must require a roll. It does not. In Powered by the Apocalypse, it doesn't matter whether something's difficult or not, right? There's no DCs in this game. There's no DCs in this game. What matters is this a exciting moment? Is this a challenging moment? Is this a moment that we, as the audience, would want to see on screen? Would this make the final cut of the movie? And if it would, then let's spend time on it. And if it's not, I don't care that it was difficult. Let's skip it and let's move on to the next thing. So in my experience, there are a lot less rolls in a Powered by the Apocalypse game. And the rolls that you do make have a lot more weight and reliance, weight and impact to the story that is happening. Because again, remember, the GM doesn't get to make any decisions about this. The rules tell us when we must roll and when we must not roll. If you're climbing over the wall and the arrows are shooting in at you, guess what? I don't get to say, and you get away scot-free. The rules actually step in and say, you must roll when you're acting despite an imminent threat. If in the fiction, we have established that you are acting despite an imminent threat, then the roll must occur. Plain and simple. And so that is something that people get really, really hung up on. That's probably the number one Powered by the Apocalypse mistake is treating the D6 2d6 roll like it's a D20 roll, and that we are trying to simulate difficulty the way that we do in a D20 game, right? Instead, we are using these when the rules kick in and say they are, which is when we reach a critical point in the story and we don't know what's going to happen. But whatever is going to happen, it's going to be interesting, right? There's a measure of uncertainty. You don't know, the player, I don't know, the GM, everybody's kind of like on tippy toes, like, what's going to happen? I don't know. And it's got to be, it usually is going to be something that is important, right? Like, it's not like my character is going to walk to work today. Are they going to get run over by a carriage? It's like, okay, no, like it needs to be part of this evolving and evocative sort of situation or story that is unfolding as we are going through it. But acting despite an imminent threat. Well, it's like, okay, well, climbing a mountain could be really dangerous. Okay, but what if in the fiction you go, my character grew up in the mountains and I have adequate climbing gear, I've got ropes. Okay, guess what? You're not acting despite an imminent threat. That sounds pretty, sure. Is it nothing? No, but it's not going to require a roll, not in the context of the game, right? You're just going to get to the top because you're doing it without any sort of fiction or without any sort of roll. Because in the fiction, you've taken care of that. It is a game system that both rewards going outside of the rules while at the same time being a stickler for the rules. And that is what makes me like the game so much, because I like having players have room for where their decisions or their bad decisions matter, but also ones that aren't just me, as a GM, just sort of like waving my hand and deciding that this person succeeds or this person fails. There's been a bunch more conversation going on here, so let me try to get caught up here. Bill, I have never played the Warren, and I got to admit, props on you for choosing to play that. That is a weird one. Not saying it's not awesome, but it is definitely an interesting game, and I would love to see it someday. So, let's see here. Yeah, so James said it's crucial that the fiction happens first and then triggers the move instead of the reverse. Right. We say, I'm going to run up the wall and I'm going to flip over as the arrows, and I'm like, oh, the arrows are sailing down on you. You're like, I don't care. I'm going to just go as fast as I can and I'm going to scale that wall like parkour, Jackie Chan style, where I'm almost like leaping up it. And I go, oh, sounds like you are defying danger. And the guy goes, totally, I'm totally defying this danger. And then we roll, right? That's the key. We've established it in the fiction first. We kind of agree as a table that this is triggering a move. And then we all quiet down and sit down and watch those die rolls, because something is going to happen. I said this before. When we roll, whether the player succeeds or the player misses, something is going to happen. And we'll get to that here in a second. Let's see. Lots of comments here. That's pretty good. And again, if you do have a question, make sure you put it in big questions. So I'm just trying to see here one here. So Lucas says, Derek, any thoughts on PbtA outshoots like City of Mist or Forged in the Dark? Well, obviously, I like Forged in the Dark games. They're really awesome. They're incredible and amazing. They have their own unique challenge. I think that a lot of what I'm saying today applies to these games. These games are, in my opinion, more mechanically complex. They are a little bit more defined. They're a little bit more structured. They have a lot more rules to them. But they are their own brand of awesome. Scum and Villainy is amazing. Blades in the Dark is some of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. And I haven't had a chance to play Band of Blades yet, but I am interested to get it to the table at some point in time. Maybe on the Patreon. That might be one of the things I try to run for our higher tier people, is I'd like to run a Band of Blades game someday. Let's see here. How much narrative agency do the players have in the system? Do they have to say, I rolled this, therefore what I said happens often? I don't 100%. So yes and no. How much narrative agency do the players have in this system? I would say it's not as super defined as in some other games that have extreme narrative agency. But as an example of this in this game, you can create moves or have moves where the player gets to essentially roll, and if they succeed, then they get a certain amount of freedom within the context of that move to make certain things true. A great example of this, I don't think I actually have that book here. This is from, actually I do. It's from Root. This is the expansion book to Root. One of the playbooks is called not the Raconteur. Okay, one of the playbooks is called the Raider. And they are sort of a brigand, a bandit, a thief, a raider. They have a move called Loot and Plunder. Come on, focus. It says, when you loot a rich area for valuables. Man, how bad is this focus? See, this is why we use really expensive cameras and not really shitty cameras. Come on. When you loot a rich area for valuables, roll with finesse. On a hit, something out of the ordinary catches your eye. Claim it, and it's yours. On a 10 or higher, you get all 3. And on a 7 through 9, choose 1. And you could choose here, when you make this roll, basically what your little special... Jesus Christ, come on. All right, let's change that up, huh? You get to pick what your special, cool, little valuable item is. This valuable item was not here until you made this roll. And so by making that move, you, the player, have asserted a certain amount of narrative fiction or narrative control into the game, and you've sort of made it more interesting on your own end. I'm sorry if that's a bad answer, but the focus thing was pissing me off. I need to manually set it. All right, where are we at? So, let's see. And again, if you have a question, either super chat or tip it so I don't miss it, or just put a big questions and I'll try to see if I can see it. But yeah, so the difference here is in these games, as we were saying before, is that when you get a hit of a 10 or higher, right, you get what you want. And you get away scot-clean. There's the scot-clean. Clean and free. Scot-free. But if you get a 7 to 9, there's a cost. You get what you want, but there's a cost. So let me give you a great example. The character is moving across they're moving across the courtyard with the bag of the king's jewels, slung over their shoulder. The guards reach the end of the courtyard and they begin shooting arrows at you. And I ask you, what do you do? And you say, I am going to bound over the wall, the garden wall, and escape. And we say, okay, cool. You are defying danger. And you say, yeah, absolutely. So we roll defy danger. And you roll a 7 to 9. Now, if you got a 10 or higher, I would say you got what you want. You got over the wall, scot-free. But if you roll a 7 to 9, now there's a cost. And this is where, as a GM, I get to interject a little bit of my actions. Because one thing we haven't talked about here is that officially, the GM doesn't roll dice. And the GM doesn't make moves. The GM only responds to the players. The GM gets to make a move. Now, the game codifies these as moves, but in reality, they are things that every good GM does anyways. This game just creates a formal language for explaining what it is that a GM is doing and should be doing during a game. A GM makes a move when a player rolls a 6 minus. A GM makes a move when the PC, I'm going to write this down here, hands you a golden opportunity. Okay. We'll talk about that in a second. What is a golden opportunity? And the third is when the PCs look at you to find out what happened. So these are seem like they're very silly answers, but the long and the short of it is, in this game, you are responding to the players. That's the key. You'll notice this. Look, all three of these, okay, happen after the PCs do something. Okay? The PC decided to make a move, or the PC was doing something in the fiction, and then the move happened, and then they rolled low. Great. I get to respond. Remember I said, when the PCs miss, that's a 6 or minus. Okay? That's a miss. That means I, the GM, get to make a move. Right? It's not nothing happens. It's I get to make a move. And I'm going to make a move from my list of things that are in my book. Similarly, PCs hand you a golden opportunity. Well, what's a golden opportunity? For example, if I set up that the PC is in danger, for example, I say, you're trying to get the sword free from the stone, and I describe that there's a hail of arrows sailing your way, and you say, yeah, I don't care about the arrows. I am pulling this sword out. I am getting this thing free. That PC has just handed me a golden opportunity because I have established that there is some threat in the fiction, and they have chosen to say, yeah, screw it, ignore it. And so I get to follow through with, in the fiction, what should happen, which is you should probably take some damage or some bad stuff should happen to you because you're just going to get hit up. Similarly, if a PC says, I'm going to insult the king. Great, they've just handed me a golden opportunity. I'm going to go and say, okay, well, you insulted the king, so the king is going to banish you from his realm, right? There is, if a move doesn't trigger, the PC's actions still have consequences, but it's all just part of our fiction. It's just part of our conversation when we go back and forth. Similarly, when the PCs look to me to find out what happened, when the PC turns to me and says, hey, I pushed, there's a statue, right? And you said it has strange eyes. What happens if can I push the eyes in? And then they look at me and they say, what happens? And I could say, nothing, right? Again, I said, I didn't say that nothing ever, when the PCs roll, nothing happens. Instead, the PCs get to generate a GM move, and the GM gets to decide what happens. And this is where the secret sauce of Powered by the Apocalypse comes in. The game talks about the GM making hard moves and soft moves. You see, in a traditional D20 game, in order to control the pace of your game, you have to either design it perfectly and then use exactly balanced encounters to get exactly the type of game that you want. Or you have to fudge like hell. You have to cheat constantly. You have to fudge die rolls so that a fight is as hard as you want it to be. Maybe this wasn't supposed to be a hard fight, but the PCs are getting their ass beat. So you start fudging. You start changing numbers. You throw the weak template on some monsters in PF2. You start fudging die rolls because this wasn't supposed to be a hard fight. Similarly, the PCs are going up against the big boss and they're having an easy time of it. And the boss can't roll really well. And you're like, no, I wanted this to be an exceptionally challenging and hard fight. So I want the PCs to have to struggle. So I'm going to fudge a little bit. I'm going to give the monster some more hit points. I'm going to say that the 2 that he rolled was actually a 20 and it's a crit. And now you're in trouble. Powered by the Apocalypse, the GM doesn't even roll dice. So how could you possibly ever control the pace of your play? And the answer is in these GM moves and in this idea of hard and soft moves. Because what this allows you to do as a GM, perfectly legally, perfectly within the establishment of the rules of the game, you're not cheating, you're not fudging. When a PC rolls a 6 or minus, or when the PC hands you a golden opportunity, or when the PCs look at you to find out what happened, you are allowed to make a GM move. Now, the GM does give you some recommendations. When the PCs look to you to find out what happened, it recommends that you make a soft move. What's a soft move? A soft move is more of one that is, it's a threat, but it hasn't come to bear yet. Okay? A soft move is one that doesn't have any immediate, direct, or dire consequences. A soft move might be like, let's say you're flirting with the bartender, okay? And you say something to him, and maybe it's a little off-putting. A soft move might be like, oh, the bartender looks at you and raises an eyebrow. He looks a little displeased. That's sort of an example of a soft move. I have basically indicated, oh, this bartender is not very happy with what you just said. Now, in that same situation, I could make a hard move. A hard move could be the bartender's eyes go wide at your brazen flirting. He slaps you and kicks you out of the bar, or challenges you to a duel to the death, or pulls out a loaded crossbow and says, I'm going to kill you. I am controlling the pace of my game based off of what feels appropriate in the fiction, one, but also what feels right as sort of the director, as sort of the MC, the master of ceremonies of my game. But the same thing is true even in, say, a combat. If the PCs are trading back and forth and they roll a 6- and they're fighting some riff-raff orc bandits that aren't really supposed to be this big, massive, major threat, the game says if the PCs roll a 6-, I can make as hard of a move as I would like to. Doesn't mean I have to. Again, I'm just following the rules here. It says I can make as hard of a move as I would like to. I am well within my right, based off of the moves that are present in the game, to say that when the PCs go to engage with the orc bandit riffraff, and somebody just rolls 2d6, they roll really bad, they get a 5 total, and I say, the orcs laugh at you, they throw your sword aside, it goes flying from your hand, and then one of them buries his sword into your chest. I mean, I could do that. But that's probably not what is really established in the fiction. But I could make a soft move. The PCs are really strong. These orcs aren't really that much of a threat, and I don't really expect this to be this big bad fight. I can make as hard of a move as I want to, and that means I can even potentially make a soft move. I could even, on the PCs rolling a 6-, if we go, I'll use Dungeon World as an example because it is a game that we are all, we're more familiar with D&D terms here probably, and so many of you did not say that you've had experience with the game. Here we go, 157, sorry. The table of contents in this game is a little lacking. Okay. I am trying to find it. So there is a list here. Now, a lot of these things are things that you as a GM or DM are doing anyways. Like you're using a monster. You're revealing an unwelcome truth. There are more on the way. Reinforcements are coming. The princess is working for the evil necromancer. But one of the opportunities as a GM is I could say, offer an opportunity with or without a cost. That's a GM move. I can offer you an opportunity with or without a cost. Technically, I am allowed to say, when the PCs roll a 6- when they are going to hack and slash these bandits, and I could say, you make wide sweeping arcs, but your skill is so high, and so intense. If you'd like to, you could still deal damage to these orcs. They'll just get to deal damage to you in return. And you could say, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And now, even though your character has missed, they've still done damage. The important part is that when you roll a 6-, the ball is in the GM's court per the rules of the game. And the GM can now say, this is my opportunity to, in the rules of the fiction and in my desire of my principles. Again, this game is really big about the GM having an agenda and we've talked about this on a previous live stream. But the GM has an agenda here. This game is not agnostic. The GM has an agenda, is to portray a fantastic world, to fill the characters' lives with adventure, and to play to find out what happens. It is my nature, okay, in this case. Again, the principles to do so include things like be a fan of the characters. Why is this the worst thing I've ever seen in my life? Be a fan of, it's like it focuses and then it loses focus. All right, well, fuck it. It says things like be a fan of the characters, think off screen, think dangerous. I'm not trying to simulate a reality here. I am trying to create a dramatic moment. I am trying to make the players experience something that is going to be fun and exciting and make them ask and answer tough questions. And so to this end, this is not a way that we traditionally think of a D20 game. A D20 game is you're either cheating or you're following the rules. And the rules, the reason why we cheat is because the rules don't care about your story. The rules in D20 do not care that AC-27 villain is important or that AC-27 monster isn't important. The rules in D20 just say, this is how hard it is to hit. This is how much damage it does on a crit. It's just trying to simulate the fictional reality of your game world. And the way that you are interacting with that is strictly on a mechanical basis. In a Powered by the Apocalypse game, not only does the fiction matter, but the GM has agendas. And the game rules support the GM through their moves of creating interesting situations, filling the characters' lives with danger and excitement, portraying a fantastic world, and being a fan of the players. As a GM, you are trying to shape the game through these moves so that it is leading towards an area where it's going to be interesting. It's going to be deadly. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be fun. The difference is, if the players are rolling really well, the moves are going to give them control of the story. If the player is rolling high, if the player is rolling 10s and 12s, they're getting to pick things that they want to be true. They're getting to I'm going to hack through all these creatures and I get to succeed. And you're like, yep, yes, you do. Quid pro quo, tit for tat. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. When the players roll high, they get to sort of assert control over the story. When the players roll low, you get to assert control of the story. And when you roll in between, it's sort of a compromise. But the net is both sides are contributing, and neither side to the story, and neither side really has control. Neither side really gets to say exactly what is and what isn't, because at any time that the rules dictate that you need to roll, okay, it's not the player's decision, it's not the GM's decision, it's the game's decision. And you must say what honesty demands, and that means following those sets of the rules. So if I have established that this is a moment where the players, that a move is triggered, and we all agree on that, and the players roll a 10 or higher, they got control of that situation. Maybe that is something that we didn't expect, but that's kind of honestly the fun of the game, is when you reach these moments of uncertainty, instead of maybe looking the other way or fudging, the game leans into that. And then if the players succeed, they get to do the thing that they really want to do. But if the players fail, it's not nothing happens. No, that's more of it's like a sketch comedy show where, they point at you. And it's like the players when they roll a 6 or 5 or 3, they're going to point at you and say, okay, GM, it's your turn. What do you got for us? And at that point, you fall onto your principles and agendas where you go, what would make this moment cool? What would make this moment interesting? Again, this game doesn't care as much about what is written in the book. It cares about what is true and been established in the fiction and what's going to make the characters' lives interesting. Reveal signs of an unwelcome truth, right? The player could be attacking an orc. They're attacking an orc, okay? Think of Lord of the Rings. Think of the Mines of Moria scene, okay? The players are fighting orcs, okay? And they're kicking ass and they're taking names and they're, getting surrounded. And then someone rolled a 4-. And the GM said, okay, like the orc doesn't do damage to you. Sure, you're tangling with them, blades are crossed, but I'm going to just use that move to reveal an unwelcome truth. What's that? They have a cave troll. Yep, they have a cave troll. Maybe they didn't before, but they do now. And you're like, well, that's not fair. Again, this game isn't trying to necessarily simulate what is exactly true and what is exactly not true. It's more interested in saying, like, look, I didn't have control, but you rolled a 6-, and now I get the control. Or maybe the Balrog is coming. Maybe you awoke the Balrog, right? So, and going back to our moves before, a PC could say, I messed with the skeleton. And I go, okay, what happens? So what just happened? The PCs just look to me to find out what happened. Okay? So the PC messes with it, and I go, and they go, what happens? And I go, the skeleton starts to crumble, falls apart, falls down the well. It makes a huge racket. There's bangings of chains and reverberant echoes throughout Moria. And then you start to hear drums in the deep. And they're like, oh, crap. Now you're like, well, that's normal conversation. I agree, it is. So much of what's in this game is just formalizing with terms and words what we kind of already do as a good GM. But the point is the PCs are the one driving the car. I, the GM, am just reacting. And in the case where I'm making a move, in all 3 instances, it's because either the PC rolled a 6-, the PC handed me a golden opportunity, or the PCs did something and looked to me to find out what would happen. And the net of all of this is that you can easily and quite frankly fail forward. And that means that when the PCs don't roll well, instead of the story stopping, the story just changes. They go out of the frying pan and into the fire. You ratchet up the stakes. Maybe you give them a little bit of what they were asking for, but a lot of what they weren't asking for, right? It allows you as the GM to control the pacing of the game. It allows for you to always make the game feral. That is something that the original Apocalypse World and Dungeon World always talk about. They talk about keeping the story feral, right? You want to make sure that there is nothing humdrum or monotonous or boring about this whole experience. They want you to create an experience. This is not trying to simulate the percent chance to climb an icy slope. It is trying to create a cinematic narrative experience, but instead of doing it just through storytelling, where you and I could just trade ideas back and forth, instead, it is doing it in such a way that dice enter the story. And when the dice enter the story, nobody knows what's going to happen. PCs could roll really well and get everything they wanted. The PCs could roll really low, and then the GM gets to do their GM thing, which could be making a really hard move and putting the characters in a really, really tough spot. Maybe you just want to do a bunch of damage to them and kill them. Maybe that's the style and tone of your game. Maybe if you were playing a really rough, brutal, fantasy fucking Vietnam type game, whenever the PCs roll a 6- and you get to make a hard move, you decide that in my game, it's going to be axe through the heart, take a bunch of damage, or get really messed up. But it doesn't have to be. This is also a great way that the engine or the idea of Apocalypse World lets you as the GM control the tone or sense of what a game is. And it could be a mistake for you if the fiction hasn't changed. You know, if you're fighting orcs and like the players roll a 6- and I say, you're like, oh, you know, what happens? And I said, well, you rolled really bad. So as you're fighting with this orc, 2 more orcs enter and join the fray against you. And now it's 3 versus 1. I haven't really done any damage to the players. I've just sort of escalated the tension. I've sort of increased the pressure, and the dramatic tension is building. And I'm clearly setting up for the idea that, yeah, this could get bad for you really quickly, but I'm not necessarily literally burying the orc's sword in the PC's chest. So that is a way for me as the GM to kind of control the pacing. If I want a more super heroic kind of style of game, maybe I make a lot of soft moves. Or maybe when the PC's, like, for example, if I was playing a superhero style game like Masks, maybe we established that, and I've done this when I've played Mutants and Masterminds before. I've said, like, hey, you know what? We've played Mutants and Masterminds before where I've said, hey, do you guys want to be able to fail? You guys are going to be heroes. You're going to be trying to save buses full of children, buildings that are burning and collapsing. Do you ever, is it part of our idea of what this comic book story is, that your PCs could ever fail? That an innocent, I rolled low, the bus goes off the bridge and crashes down into the Hudson River, and all the school children on it die. Is that something that we want to even have in our game? And most of the time, people say, no, that is not something I want to have in my game, right? Same thing is true in Powered by the Apocalypse. If we were playing a superhero game and you say, my character, Spider-Man, right? He swings down, shoots his web into the bus, and grabs it right before it goes off the bridge, and you roll a 5. Well, I am within my rights as the GM to make a hard move and say, your spider web misses, or it hits the bus, but it's not strong enough. The bus tumbles off the bridge, it falls into the water and dies. But what the game engine allows me to do is instead not do that. Maybe if we were playing a really hardcore game, like, I don't know, I don't watch TV, but maybe the Boys or whatever, some brutal superhero game, that would happen. But in our superhero game, where we want things to be a little bit more lighthearted or not as dire, I could say that the bus goes over the edge, but the webbing holds, and now you're holding on to the bus, and you're kind of stretched between the 2 webs, and then you hear a shriek because you see that on the other side of the collapsing bridge, who else is in their car but Aunt May? And now you're holding this bus up, but Aunt May is near or maybe Dr. Octopus is attacking the bridge or something like that. And Doc Ock is coming in a maelstrom of legs to crush cars, including one that has Aunt May in it. And I've, again, escalated the tension. And you might say, wow, that feels a lot like something that might happen in a Marvel movie or in a comic book. And yeah, and that's why we're doing that, because Spider-Man doesn't fail and then everyone dies. No, it escalates, it escalates, it escalates. It gets more and more interesting, more and more intense. And eventually, Spider-Man has to start making sacrifices. And it's not sacrifices of other people. It's sacrifices about things like his happiness. It's sacrifices like things like his relationships. It's sacrifices like things like his normal, everyday teenage life, his job, his money, his financial situation. These are the things that Spider-Man sacrifices, not innocent lives. And Powered by the Apocalypse engine type style games, whether you're playing superhero game or D&D style game, allow you as the GM, and even to a certain extent the players, to control that tone of your game in a very, very, very smooth and seamless fashion. And that is one of the reasons why I have so much fun playing them. All right, that was a long rant. Let's see what is going on. Needom. Okay. Viewing the 2d6 as a resolution mechanism for narrative control, not for simulation aspects, makes a lot more sense. The plus car stats from sheet always misled me in thinking way. Yes. Yes. In fact, that's a great point. I'm glad that made so much sense. So in the game of Masks, let's see if we have in the... I will say that a lot of these games, unfortunately, don't have great... unfortunately, do not have really great indexes. nor do they have anything that I would remotely call useful table of contents. Unfortunately, they tend to be kind of garbage. This is what you get when you have a bad editor. All right. All right. So we don't get anything. Okay. I was seeing if there was an easy way to check the stats. Here we go. See? And they don't even have a list of them. They're just in the playbook. So in a game like Masks, your stats aren't even stats. They are danger, freak, savior, superior, and mundane, right? The stats in a game like Masks are more about your character's attitude or personality than they are physical stats, right? So like if right, like if you're trying to blend in with a bunch of ordinary people, right? You're going to be rolling your mundane stat, not, there's no charisma, there's no stuff, so the stats in a game like Masks are much more ambivalent and abstract than they, it's not saying this is how strong I am, this is how dexterous I am, right? So the stats themselves can be very, very abstract and change. Question, how would one have the situation escalate into something like that? Assuming the players keep rolling low. How would one have the situation escalate into something like that? Nita Wolven, describe what you mean. How would one have the situation escalate into something like that? Like what? The choose X things to happen on a success is kind of weird to me coming from a more D20 system. Yes, Kevin, that is also very true as well. But that, again, this is the idea that when you roll a hit in Powered by the Apocalypse, that is you, the player, saying, these are the things that I want to see happen in the story. These are the things that are interesting to me, or these are the things that my character wants, or these are the things that I think we need to succeed at our goals or push my drives towards experience points. It's a way for you to sort of get to checkbox that, hey, these are the interesting things, and I want to pursue. Masks, again, like I said, I would start with Dungeon World or Monster of the Week. Apocalypse World or Monster of the Week or Dungeon World. Then I would probably, read like a Masks or a Thirsty Sword Lesbians or then a Root, right? Like I would start with the basics and sort of work your way up because, like anything, the games have gotten better. People have figured out ways to use them more often. All right. Context. The super comic situation described with the bus and the tension continue to that ratcheting up, but the things at stake being non-obviously connected to the situation. It's real simple. That's it. The 2d6 roll is not about the action. It's about the story and the consequences of that action. So I go to save the bus, I roll a 6-, Aunt May shows up. In a Powered by the Apocalypse game, that is totally fine. In fact, one of the moves that they talk about in Dungeon World, I will pull it up here, and this one is very important to know as a GM, is, and we talked about this in another one, but one of the moves is, here we go. Sorry, one of the principles moves, yada, 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 yada. Oh, Jesus Christ. Here we go. Is think off-screen 2, right? So the player could roll a 6- on the bridge, and you could tell them, maybe their players don't even, maybe the PC itself doesn't know, but because they rolled a 6- on the other side of town, something bad is happening. And you could say, like, wait a second, what does that have to do with anything? It doesn't. It doesn't. The dice are a random generator. You have to divorce them from being part of the fiction. The moves that you have in a Powered by the Apocalypse game aren't physical things that you're doing. They are these narrative mechanical constructs that are designed to push you into interesting situations. Yeah, I mean, yes, listen, sometimes it's going to be obvious that the player did X and that the consequence for the problem was directly related to it, and it's easy to just go blink, blink. But that can create a problem in Dungeon World where if the players keep rolling low or they keep rolling 7s and 9s, you can do this problem of an escalation spiral where things keep escalating and they never resolve unless, like, if you create a situation where you go, the players are never going to get anywhere until they roll, I guess, a bunch of 10s or higher in a row. This is a common mistake because you keep adding threats and you keep adding things, and now there's 5 buses over the edge of the bridge, and now there's 6 buses over the edge of the bridge, and you just keep escalating because you're obsessed with the current scene. You're obsessed with what's going on right now. And when the players roll a miss, or if the players roll a 7 or 9, you're thinking always on screen, but that's not the way you need to think. Sometimes it's right for the immediate scene to come to a close, but for those consequences to almost think of them as like you're banking them for later. You're going to create, because remember, a lot of times you're not really playing with an adventure when you play these games. It's the PCs that their action is sort of what's pushing the next threat. You're like, look, later on, I'm trying to think of another. Green Goblin wasn't going to attack the science fair, but you rolled a 6-, and so kind of now he is. So while this was happening, the Green Goblin went and kidnapped Mary Jane, right? Oh, because you were busy being Spider-Man on the bridge, Green Goblin was able to go kidnap your girl. That's the consequence for being Spider-Man. Meanwhile, you clean up the mess. Now, you could say, yeah, but if the PC rolled a 10+ when he was trying to get the bridge and get the bus, then would Green Goblin not have kidnapped Mary Jane? Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe that complication wouldn't have come forward because the player rolled well and they got to control the story of the game and Spider-Man got to have a good day. And it's this kind of back and forth, this sort of yin-yang relationship. And I think that's so important. So how do you handle lazy players that always pass the torch back to the GM in PbtA? Well, we didn't talk about this, but one of the other things that's really important about PbtA is there is no combat round. There is no initiative. There is no cyclical initiative. It's always a conversation. There is no roll for combat. There is no roll for initiative, right? You are always just having a conversation. Whether that's, walking down the road to the new city, or escaping from the King's Guard and their Guardian, or engage in a dueling sword fight at the top of a crumbling ruin. So it is you as a GM could sit there. Now, players may get upset at you, and rightfully so. You do have a certain amount of responsibility as both not being a dick, but also being a reasonable person to, make sure that you are giving players the right amount of spotlight time. But it might be that in this particular fight or in this particular moment, everybody's really interested in what's happening to Azius. And so instead of being like, Azius, it's your turn. Gwildor, it's your turn. Burl, it's your turn. Stick with Azius for a while. We'll get back to those other people, and maybe you can quickly shoot over to them. Okay, Azius just smashed that guy. What are you doing really quick? Okay, you're going to do that? All right, we'll get to that in a second. Azius, all right, you just smashed that guy. You're kicking over the edge. You're dangling from a cliff. Burl, he's dangling from a cliff. Do you want to do anything about that, right? Like, it's kind of like being like a live TV show producer. You ever see those? Or like an orchestra conductor. You're sort of juggling all of these balls, and you are sort of in the moment making up decisions about where should the camera be looking? Where should I be pointing my spotlight? And if you have a player who is not very active and not very engaged, maybe because they aren't as engaged, maybe because they're not comfortable. You don't have to force them to do as much. You can simply ask them very quickly and very quietly questions. Hey, Boothby, thanks a lot, man. That's awesome. Thanks for the $20. Super chat here. Have you used any lessons learned from playing PbtA in more tactical games like PF2? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for me, a big thing about it is to really, really try to think of, at every point in time, be thinking, how do I make this more interesting? How do I create a more, a more interesting and, I'm sorry, I gotta moderate my fucking chat here. That's what happens when I don't have mods. Yeah, it's weird how that happens. What was I saying? Oh, right. Okay. Any lessons? So one of the things that you can definitely do here is consider that the PC's actions, and when they roll low or don't succeed, try to figure out ways to give them an encouragement, give them a option to push their luck a little bit, right? I guess a good way of describing this is, again, this is kind of outside of the scope, and I don't want to give any spoiler alerts, but if you recently watched Quest for the Frozen Flame, episode 4, and again, it's a little bit of a spoiler alert, but it's not that big of a spoiler alert, but they party encountered a big dinosaur, and Kaz's character, Thrawn the Barbarian, has the tame animal feat, which he got from listening and to Emek, the small child prodigy druidic animal whisperer. And he said, oh, this would be awesome to add to the herd. I'm going to make a tame animal check. And I said, okay, make a nature check. And the way that the nature check works is you make a nature check. If you succeed, the animal, is pretty calm and will listen to you for a little while and eventually kind of loses interest. And if you roll a critical success, the animal is like yours for life, loves you. And, he failed. He didn't have a good charisma or good wisdom. He's only trained in nature. It's versus the creature's will DC. And, he failed, whatever. And we thought that was the end of it. And then Bob said, I'm going to shoot it. And a fight started breaking out. But remember, I want to be a fan of the characters. And I want to give them options that are going to allow them to succeed, even if it's at a slightly different cost or a different kind of way of thinking. And so in my mind, Kaz rolled low. Okay, so this is kind of my move. And I say, okay, the creature is being attacked and shot, and then Kaz grappled it. And I realized at that moment, this is a great opportunity for me to give him an additional opportunity. I said, Kaz, you've got him grappled. You could continue to attack it. You could, keep beating it, and we could kill the creature and move on. But I'm going to give you an opportunity. If you want to give up your attack for the turn, you can instead try to tame the animal using your athletics check against its will DC, representing you literally breaking it, right? Instead of being, taming it sort of animal whisper style, you're going to like tame it, like breaking a horse style, where you sort of rope it up and muscle it to the ground and sort of dominate its will through your physical strength. And he said, hell yeah, that is exactly what I want to do. That sequence of events is very much not part of the Pathfinder 2 rule set. The tame animal feat does not allow you to use athletics to tame the animal. But I did. And the reason why I did that, I think, is because I am looking for that moment. I don't want to just give players a free lunch. That's not fun. That's not interesting. But what I do like giving players is interesting choices and interesting decisions. And then I like going, look, this could end up either way. This could end up with him rolling low, wasting his opportunity, and then the beast thrashes him to death. Or maybe he'll roll really well, and then the wrestler basically wrestled the dino to the ground and sort of held it in submission until it gave up and submitted to his will. Either way, this is going to be really interesting, and I don't know what's going to happen, but it's fun and it's unexpected. And I did not expect the game to go in this direction, but I am going to go with it. Instead of fighting against it, I am going to go with it. And to me, this was more of an example, to London's point. I think this was more of an example of me being a fan of the characters, right? This was not me trying to, because there's nothing in the story that cares whether or not this dinosaur is part of your herd or whether or not you kill it for parts. In fact, I actually told them, and that's why Bob shot it. I said, well, look, it's a big dinosaur. If you bring this creature down, okay, number one, it's worth experience. Great. Obviously, taming it's worth experience, but you already blew your shot at that. Little did I know that they would wrestle it to the ground. But I was like, but if you fight it, you get experience. Cool. 2, you get food, meat for the tribe, and we're tracking food as sort of a resource for the tribe. And 3rd, because we are using the monster parts system, you're going to have this awesome hide and, the crest or whatever of this really cool big dinosaur. Maybe you'll get some really cool, I don't know, magical items out of it. And so I'm giving the players a choice, and they don't get to have all of it. They get to have some of it, and we get to see what their choices do and whether they can take it. And then we use dice to make sure that we don't know what's going to happen, and it could end up either way. And what ends up, the net, regardless of how you get there, when you're in a situation where the players don't know, where the GM doesn't know, certainly the viewers at home don't know what's going to happen, and we're all holding our breath and watching the dice roll, like, that's a really cool moment. That's a great moment in any RPG. Those are arguably, for me, the best moments. And that's the kind of experience that I try to create in as many of my role-playing games as possible. And I feel like that philosophy from these games is what is more important than the rules. It's this idea of leading with the fiction and moving with it and using what's already been established and taking what makes sense and what feels right and going with it. But don't ignore the dice just to get there. Just because you think something sounds cool, don't, again, we talked about this before, way back at the beginning. We have this fiction, okay? But we also have these mechanics, okay? And a lot of times in our games, these mechanics mean dice. The fiction drives the mechanics, but the mechanics lead back into the fiction, right? When you're playing your game and it's very, very rote and mechanical, that's just the mechanics feeding back into themselves, right? That's just where you're basically playing a video game. That's where you're playing a board game. Right, and we're playing and I played plenty of these. I played Gloomhaven, I played Warhammer. I'm not role playing. There's no fictional situation. It's just me versus you, your mechanics versus my mechanics, Magic the Gathering, and that could be fun. I like those type of games. There's also a common trait when you are ignoring the mechanics because you've got a fiction, you've got a story to tell, and so your fiction is just feeding the fiction. You're just ignoring the mechanics because your fiction is more important than the mechanics. And so the players do something and then you respond. And you either just ignore the dice completely or you cheat, you fudge. I think both of those situations are not optimal. I think the best situation is when you have this cycle, this sort of wonderful yin yang of action and reaction, and it sort of, feeds into one another because, we're rolling dice because of something that's really happening. And then the dice that we did roll are going to determine what happens next. And that means that so we started here from a known position A. And then we got to a moment and we could have gone to B or C or maybe D, and we rolled the dice and it turned out that it was C. And now from C, we have new options, E and F, and we end up going down F, and then we roll dice again and we end up at G. And at no point did I ever think that we were even remotely going to get here. I didn't plan for this eventuality. I didn't plan for this contingency, but we're here because the dice demanded that we made it here. And so I think that's an important, important step. Let me see here, catch up here. You mean the dino doesn't show up back in book 3 and reveal a letter that leads to its older brother? No, exactly. No, it does not. Oh, that's good. to me, fudging requires having a particular outcome and more so than enabling interesting outcomes. Yeah, I think that's generally true. I mean, fudging can be a very complex topic, but yeah, a lot of times when you are fudging, it's because the GM themselves wants the outcome to be a exact one. You know, the GM wants D, right? They want they want D to happen. They want F to happen. So they are pushing the mechanics or ignoring the mechanics in order to facilitate getting to a certain spot. If the GM, on the other hand, is fudging because they're like, I want to make this interesting, I want to create interesting situations, that is a more murky gray area. And I think that could be really important as well. Because even something like, I wanted this fight to be really hard, so I'm going to give the creature more hit points. Well, yeah, but now you have an agenda. Your agenda is, I wanted this creature to be a difficult fight, and so I'm going to, change the situation of the game. But a GM who says, you know what? I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I kind of don't care what the outcome is going to be. You know what? The king is going to offer the PC his daughter's hand in marriage. I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't really have an agenda either way, except for I like to watch my players sweat. If anything, that's what I take away from all these games. I like to watch my players sweat. I like to put my players in sort of no-win scenarios. I like to put my players in tough scenarios where they actually have to think and they go, there's really no good way out of this. Those to me, maybe I'm sadistic, are the most interesting. Do you know of any systems that deal with normal humans getting video from a literary, from a lit RPG perspective, getting video game-like powers? No, I do not. But I mean, arguably, you could just treat the powers that you get in these games and literally treat them like a video game like situation where it's literally on a hot bar, on a cooldown timer, and they're like, oh, I gained power attack, but it's specifically like a lit RPG style PbtA game or even other type of game. No, actually, I do not. I do not know of any system that does that, Kevin. Let us see here. How do I feel about Fate Core or even at Genesis as compared to PbtA? So Fate has fate points. It has narrative currency. It achieves its aims, I feel, very differently than Powered by the Apocalypse games. I like Fate. I think on the spectrum of games. So let me hold on a sec here. Let me clear this. So on the sort of narrative to game spectrum, over here you have literal storytelling. Like, we're sitting around the campfire and we're just telling stories, right? Or you play that game where someone talks for a while telling a story, and then you point at somebody else around the campfire and they have to keep telling the story. After that is sort of Critical Role or most actual plays, in that they're technically playing a game, but they're really mostly just telling a story. Then I would get into literally what I would call storytelling RPGs. These are games like Dread or Fiasco. Then I would put in Fate. Then I would put in PbtA. Then I would put in Genesis. And I would probably put Blades in the Dark in this same category. Then I would get to 3E PF1. Then I would get to PF2. So that is sort of the spectrum that I would put it. I would say Fate is more narrative focused, and I would say Genesis is a little bit more game focused. So that would be my answer to that question, James. Good question, though. see. You can't fudge if you roll in the open, right? And you can't fudge if you don't roll any dice, right? In Powered by the Apocalypse, you don't roll any dice. So there you go. Oh, sorry, that's you talking to somebody else. Pardon me if I missed this by showing up late, sorry, but I've heard it's almost impossible to get an unqualified success in Powered by the Apocalypse, and maybe because pure success isn't dramatically interesting. Is this true? This is not true. If you roll a 10 or higher, the GM does not get to make a move. There are no consequences to your success. You just succeed. You get what you want. You get everything you ask for, and I don't necessarily know that that's boring. I think it's a welcome surprise. You're like, yes, that was awesome. That was a cool, great moment for us. I will argue that if the PCs succeed all the time, yeah, I do think that is boring. But no, so to put it another way, if your character has like a +2 to their stat, then you only need to roll an 8 or higher on your 2d6 to get a 10 or higher. And God, my math is bad here. There are 5 ways to roll an 8. Is that right? Yeah. 4, 3, 2, 1. So that is 6, 10. So that's 15 ways out of 36. So not quite, but you're probably like, if you have a +2, you're probably something like 40% to roll a 10 or higher. If you have a +2 stat on your 2d6 roll, then you're something like probably 40% to roll a 10 or higher. So yeah, I mean, and that's a success with no drawbacks, no issues. Your chance of actually just getting a success at all, even if it's one that's sort of a success with a cost or a complication, is probably something like 80% or something higher, 90%. So yeah, like you can concede in that. I'm missing 7th C. Yeah, Ben, I am missing 7th C. I'm sorry. I don't know, where would I put 7th C? I would think I would put 7th C. I think actually I would put 7th C like in the fate column. I don't know what you think, Ben. Maybe it actually is just right here. Somewhere in between there. That's where I would put 7th C. Let's see. Yeah, second edition Mutants and Masterminds is incredible. Do any PbtA systems care about party size or other balance elements? Nope. Sounds like it should matter, but not sure if some are more chewy. Well, that is an interesting point because this game, Root, is what I would consider to be the most, at least in my experience, the most chewy Powered by the Apocalypse game. It doesn't have any conversations for party size, because remember, party size, I mean, I guess you could say arguably it doesn't really matter what the party size is, because if I'm making 20 rolls, right, there's no initiative, there's no guarantee that everybody's going to get a check. So if I'm making 20 or 30 rolls over the course of a session and I only have 2 players, well, it looks like each player is probably making 15 rolls. But if I have more players, then they're making less. But I will say that these games are very open and honest about the number of players. Okay? And that includes the DM or the GM. So this game is saying that you should play with 1 GM and 2 players, or up to 1 GM and 5 players. And it's really saying, if you have more friends than that, then, maybe you should go play, I don't know, 5-on-5 on a half court or something, or a full court. Sorry. Because this game is basically saying, like, if you get above that, it'll work, but, there's not a lot. There's too many things going on, It's like when you watch a movie that's just way too many storylines. You're like, this is getting a little bit too much. So, I think that, no, I think that it doesn't really care about party size, but at the same time, I think the game does work best with 3 to 5 players, for sure. Where does standard 5e not on the CRAP go? Oh, that's a great question. Where does it go? It goes, well, it's actually not, it's not on this axis as much, but it would go here. To me, 5e and 3e are like almost the same game. For sure. I would also point out that 4e goes here. For sure. Curious if I've ever played the hero system. It looks, we played it at a lot of clubs. It looks like a game, but the rule statistics make it sort of obscure. Yeah, hero is an example of a game that just, it to me is only interested in simulating. It's only interested in simulating. It's using game mechanics to simulate as many probabilities as it can, and it's using all these different stats and all these different stuff to get to that outcome. And it's giving you tools and options in order to control those probabilities. And it's very, it's not my cup of tea. I've only played it half-heartedly, though. I've actually never owned, I think I've actually ever owned Hero. I think I own Rifts, but that's about it. Yeah, I own Rifts, but not Hero. Is that crap acronym on purpose? No, it's CR/AP. I did not do that. If you have 10 players play AD&D, that is true, Ben. And a basic D&D or AD&D with 10 players works beautifully. In fact, arguably, the game is almost designed for you to have that many players. James says, I appreciate the story to game access. I find that access to be orthogonal to the simulation fidelity, not necessarily the simulation's goal as necessary. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, again, these are complicated game philosophy concepts, but it is different. There are different games that are different on the simulation, and for sure. Let's see. Ironically, I think FKR and narrative games can often better simulate reality if your fiction is simply the real world. Yeah, now we're getting enough crazy talk here. So, you know, before we wrap up here, I kind of wanted to point out a couple of cool things that I really do like about Powered by the Apocalypse games. And some of these are specifically from certain games, which have sort of embraced them and taken them in different directions. So, Monsterhearts. Monsterhearts introduced to the world of Powered by the Apocalypse the concept of strings. You could think of these as heartstrings, or you could think of them as puppet strings. And to me, this is a great example of where a game's mechanics can create interesting play patterns in the fiction. And what a string is think of a string as a token, okay, with your character's name on it. Okay? In this game, Monsterhearts, it is a story game about the messy lives of teenage monsters. This game is trying to simulate, in a sense, a certain aspect of, maybe Twilight or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But really what it's more about is it's about how being a teenager is complicated and it's tough. And, we may not be literal monsters, as you are in this game, vampires and werewolves, but sometimes we can feel like we are. And so the fiction is one of your character being controlled and manipulated by other people, NPCs and other PCs. And so in this game, when you make certain moves, sometimes you have to give one of your strings to another person. And they keep this. It's kind of like a hero point, but it's a hero point with your name on it. And this hero point, this string is what it's called, allows them a sense to control you. You can use it to control an NPC. You can even use it to control a PC. Now, a PC can say no, because we're going to respect their autonomy. But if you accept it, you earn experience points. In fact, it's arguably kind of the main way that you earn experience points in this game. And the way that you earn experience points in a game is a very important thing to understand. This goes beyond Powered by the Apocalypse, by the way. To understand what is it that this game wants me to do. Experience points are the game's way of telling you what they want you to do. So in this game, you take moves, and sometimes when you fail, or sometimes if things don't go the way you want them to, you end up having to give a string to another player. What might this look like? Let's say that there's a boy at school that I really like, and I need to ask him to sign my petition that I'm running for student council. And I make a check, and I don't roll very high. So my character fails the move, and maybe I got a 7. So I succeed, but with a cost. And the cost is I have to give this boy that I have a crush on a string on me. Why? Because in the fiction, I'm being very nervous, and I'm flustered, and I'm flushed. This character gets it. I like him. They understand that I have a crush on him. And they kind of have leverage over me now. They get a string on me that they can maybe pluck or pull or use later on because they have leverage on me. They have some dirt on me. They have a heartstring on me, a puppet string. And in the course of the game, maybe later on, this boy that I have a crush on, and again, we're trying to make the story pretty feral, comes back to me and says, hey, I think maybe they're trying to manipulate me. Maybe I, as the player, know that they're trying to manipulate me, but I'm embracing the fiction of this character, and I know that this character is just trying to manipulate me. And they come to me and they say, hey, I was thinking about how I haven't gone to prom yet. I don't have a prom date, but, maybe, if you're not busy, maybe you could go with me. The only problem is if I fail my final, I don't get to go to prom. Do you think you could maybe, I don't know, cheat, give me the test scores, take the test for me or whatever. And I say, hey, this character, this NPC, or it could be another PC, they are going to use the string on you to try to get you to do this plan. And if you accept the string, then you are bound by the rules of the game. You have to go through with this, but you get experience points. And I say, well, the game is telling me that the experience points is how I advance my character. I'm going to accept this string, and my character is going to essentially be swayed or motivated by their crush who has this string on me because they know that I like them, and they're going to use that against me to get what they want by empowering this string. And now my character suddenly finds himself sneaking into, the vice principal's office after school hours to get the test results or to change the grade. Hey, I heard you're really good with that computer stuff. Do you think you could, sneak into vice principal, Anthony's video and, right? And suddenly we're in this very complex, messy situation. And it was all driven by mechanics. It was driven basically by me trying to level up. It was driven by me trying to get some fat XP. But the strings concept from Monsterhearts pushes you towards those dramatic moments. And, Andrew, I think you make a really important point, which I also don't think gets talked about enough. And I think it's important. I'm glad that you brought this up, Andrew. Not every game, but Powered by the Apocalypse games, I don't want to say it's wrong to say that they're serious because they're not always serious. They can be lighthearted, they can be funny. But they do tend to ask hard questions, right? Because, in a D20 game, you either pass or you fail. You succeed or you fail. And the game rules are set up so that most of the time, like, think about a combat. How often do you lose a combat? How often do you TPK in a combat? Like, almost never, right? Like, how many hundreds of Pathfinder 2 fights, happen on just our Discord server. How many of them have resulted in a TPK? In fact, in our entire Northern Reaches game, which has had hundreds of games played or something crazy like that, we have had exactly one TPK. So the odds are extremely in your favor that you are going to pass, that you are going to succeed, that you are going to win, that you're going to you're going to be the big damn hero. You're going to kick ass. You're going to take names. You're going to win. You're going to kick open the door. You're going to pick the lock. You're going to climb the wall. You're going to jump over the pit trap. You're going to kill the monsters. You're going to save the day. You're going to save the prince. You're going to get the gold. The games are set up to be like win, 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 win. Almost infinitely. Powered by the Apocalypse games are almost designed that you are going to fail a lot. That you are going to end up... Now, failure doesn't mean not fun. Failure doesn't mean end of the session. Failure just means your character's life gets more complicated. Failure means the situation changes. Failure means you may have to accept third place. Or failure might mean you just have to accept, I'm going to finish the race on my own terms. It doesn't mean you get a gold medal. Doesn't mean you get a silver medal or bronze medal. It means you grit through the pain and you still finish the race. Your head held high, but it's a personal victory. Certainly not one that counts in the record books. These games do push you towards drama. They push you away from the power fantasy kick-ass, dare I say, anime style of modern fantasy D20 games. And that is not for everyone. Not everyone is going to like that. Not everyone is looking for that kind of experience. Some people want to sit down, have a beer, open up a bag of pretzels, and, hack and cleave their way through orcs. Or sit back and listen to the GM read the latest, adventure path to them. And occasionally, when the GM tells them to, they will roll a die. And then they will tell them a number, having no idea or context over really why they're rolling. And that is fine. That is what a lot of people want, and that is what a lot of people do. I am simply saying that if you want a different experience to that, then it's possible that Apocalypse World, or one of its many inspired works, might be something that you're interested in doing with. I also suggest, unfortunately, that a lot of people who play the game don't play it right. And that's not their fault. They all have this very heavy D20 basis bias. They tend to, kind of almost use cyclical initiative. They treat dice rolls the same as they would in a D20 game, where it's a simulation of the chance of you succeeding. Just roll too many dice. They create escalation spirals. It feels like you could never get out of any situation without, basically being dead. It could be problematic. So it's tough to find good game masters, or MCs, I think is what they were originally called in the game, to play this with. And so if you do have an opportunity to play with someone who at least is very experienced with the game, that would be my recommendation. If you're ever at a gaming convention, I would check out Indie Games on Demand. I think they have a Discord too, but I don't know if they run games on there, but it's called iGod, Indie Games on Demand. They usually run at every major convention. I don't know what they're doing now. I think they weren't, certainly the last couple of years because of COVID, but here you will get some incredibly talented GMs who are masters of playing a variety of indie games, but PbtA games are certainly near the top of that list, and that's a fantastic way to learn how to play. It's how I learned how to play. It's certainly how I was exposed to most of these games, whether they were in their early beta or not. Let's see. ICRPG is a good example of gaming, but not simulationist. I actually agree with this. Index card, not what I call Ice Crown. Index card RPG. It's not in here, but I do have that book. It's really good, but it's not simulationist at all. Yes. Yes, Tim and I played a PbtA game called, I think it was PbtA, called Magic Girl, and it was really awesome. I actually like that quote, Bill. It's less about learning a new system and more like unlearning an old one. Kinda, yeah. It really is. I think that's a great way of putting it. It's about taking these concepts, these principles, and these agendas, and sort of reversing the process in them, and sort of thinking about it from the perspective of a sort of a screen, like you're a director, but you're not the screenwriter, right? This is something that blows, you see a lot of these indie films or whatever, but that are like written, directed, and starred in by the same person, right? Like Quentin Tarantino, he writes and directs all of his own movies, right? And he's this super talented, weird, artsy guy. But like most movies are written by somebody else, and then they are directed by someone entirely different. They did not write the story. They are just there to take that story and make it sizzle, make it pop, make it interesting. And that's kind of the way you need to think about your role as a GM. The story is kind of being created as you're going through it, right? It's like, when they're filming a movie and they're making script rewrites every day as they go through it. Your job is to take what's happening and go, how do I make this look good? How do I make this interesting? How do I keep the audience's attention? In this case, the audience is your players, and to a certain extent, you as well. How do I stay interested? How do I, be a part of this game? Because how do I make it fun? And that is kind of the emphasis that they're going for there. Ben is the Tarantino of Knights of the Last Call. All right, so we got a little bit past 9 o'clock here, so I wasn't going to go too much longer, but did anybody have any kind of final questions? Maybe we'll do another version of this where we can kind of delve more into specific moves and mechanics, but I really kind of wanted to talk about why these games work, and the fact that so many of you said that you had never even played a PbtA game meant that I did keep it pretty high level. If it was in my power to do so, I would love to play some of these games as, I think a lot of people end up playing them as one shots, but I think that even playing it as a multiple shot is better, because you get to really experience how the game grows and changes. So it's a lot of fun. And even if you don't necessarily 100% dig the Powered by the Apocalypse game, you might dig one of its very similar kind of inspired cousins, like Iron Sworn, or something like Blades in the Dark, which is definitely in that genre, in that inspired section. London says, I could see why PbtA would be a great inspiration for many IPs. Like Firefly is not about what type of guns each character has and what size damage dice they use. Correct. Exactly. That is not, that's a great way of putting it. In fact, this game is Firefly. Scum and Villainy. Obviously, it sounds like it's named after Star Wars, but there's literally a class in Scum and Villainy. There's literally a class called the Pilot, and the Pilot has a bunch of moves that they can take, right? And one of the moves they have is called, yeah, you guessed it, Leaf on the Wind. And if you are a Firefly fan, then you obviously understand what Leaf on the Wind means. There is also a class in this game called the Muscle. You're sort of like, the hired gun, the heavy hitter. And one of the Muscle's items that they get is a fine sniper rifle named Vera. So again, if you're a fan of Firefly, then you know what Vera is. So again, it's that's the other thing, of that these games allow you to make some really crazy moves in the story. This game here, Night Witches, is about an all-women bomber contingent out of the Soviet Union during World War II who flew completely outdated World War I era planes during World War II and were given bomber targets against German positions, and suffered brutal sexism, brutal conditions, and yet had this incredibly stellar performance record, as far as war goes. And this game takes you through this experience. And so, you know, there's a million different types of games. You know, this one is sort of a Flash Gordon style adventure. This game here, the Sprawl, is sort of cyberpunk, Shadowrun, net hack, security corp kind of Blade Runner-esque thing. So there's just a ton of ways that you can take a genre and use this sort of core structure of game and just create these incredible experiences. And it all came from this one initial base book, and this idea of not just the philosophy of the game or the mechanics of the game, but just the idea of it. Let's see here. We're talking about. Sorry, I'm just catching up here. you confront the Alliance mole. You roll 4. Kaylee gets shot in the stomach. That's perfect, London. That's exactly right. Now, is she dead? No, but the tension is up, and she could be dead, and what will happen? And, you know, that is... Yes, anytime you watch a show after you've played a game like this, you can literally convert everything that's happening into dice rolls. And you can see how they cut the scene and move to the next interesting point when something interesting is going to happen. Either an event where there's uncertainty, dramatic uncertainty, or it could be a moment between two characters and we're not sure which way they're going to go. Either way, it's dramatic, it's interesting, it's exciting, and if we don't know what's going to happen, we're rolling dice and we're going to find out. Yeah, I was never a big fan of the Cortex system, so I don't have any particular opinion on that. I think Dungeon World and Masks sound great. We're often looking for a game we can play on the couch. Hey, we got a tip. There's a super chat here. Chris, thanks for this, by the way. I bought Root and was initially turned off by the system. Okay, well, yeah, no, absolutely, Chris. And Chris, if you're not a member, if anybody of you who have joined here or watched are not a member of our Patreon, I really encourage you to do that. We have a whole section on our Patreon Discord dedicated to other non-D20 style games. It's definitely an area that I would like to spend more time and attention on. There's a lot of people talking about 5e. There's a fair amount of people talking about Pathfinder 2. And, I think some of these other games deserve a chance in the sun as well. Are they as popular? No, unfortunately not. But I do love talking about them. And I do think that even if they're not your cup of tea, I think thinking about the game from the perspective of being a fan of the PCs, trying to make their lives feral, thinking off screen, saying what honesty demands, etc., etc. These principles, these agendas can just make you a better game master on every level. So thanks again, Chris. I hope I am super excited about Root. Chris, if you're not aware of this, we, the Knights, are going to be starting a new actual play. We're going to keep playing Pathfinder 2 every other week, like we have been. Quest for the Frozen Flames, Tuesdays. But on the opposite Tuesdays to that, we are going to start a new game series where we are going to play more indie games, not Pathfinder, not 5th edition. And our first game that we are going to be playing is going to be Root. And my hope is to do something like, it depends, we'll go with the flow. Like, I don't have an exact number, but, a lot of these are going to be sort of what I will call mini campaigns. Maybe not, not like one shots or multi-shots, but like 5 to 8 sessions, right? Enough time to allow the characters to sort of create some trouble, create some problems, build up some interesting, drama, and then watch what the PCs do to unravel it. And kind of like New Game Who Dis, but do it in a way that we can actually play the game and not just do a one shot, but actually do like a 3, 5, or even 8 session game. So, kind of similar to when like some of the Critical Role kind of mini campaigns that they've done. So yeah. So again, thanks, Chris. Hopefully you do give Root another chance. I think it's a pretty sweet game. I'm really excited about it. Crom, Derek has a lot of games. Yes. And this isn't even all my, like, I've got Thirsty Sword Lesbians over there. I got I got a couple more, and I've got some on PDF too. I don't actually have the physical book, and Avatar doesn't have a print copy yet, so I got that one coming in. The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power is in the other room. There's a lot of good ones out there. See, look, all these people quoting Firefly. We should just be playing. Just don't play them on one of my game nights, please. Well, Bill, there's always the video on demand. Although I do like having people being able to play in person. So, the other thing is too, my plan is with the Patreon. We've grown up the Patreon quite a bit, and one of the things I'm really looking forward to doing is finding a way to, reward some of my higher patron members, my higher tiers, the people who've been paying the big bucks, keeping the lights on. I want to start trying to maybe find a way for me to run some games and really extending that option to some of my highest tier people in the Patreon. I know some other content creators do this, where they, essentially charge money to get to play games with them. It's not my favorite thing to do in the world, but it is an unfortunate reality situation. I can't play games with everybody as much as I would love to. Catch me at Origins or Gen Con sometime. Maybe that's a different story. But in the context of the Patreon, my time is somewhat limited. But I would love to get an opportunity to play these games, especially for people who haven't played them before, and to get a sense for what they are. Because it's not just about playing the game for me. It's about understanding why the game works, how it works, what is it trying to do, how does it reward you. And if you like that cycle of play, if doing the things that the game wants you to do, then and that's how the game rewards you. If you enjoy that cycle, then that's a game that you should be playing. If you're playing a game where either you don't like because that's basically how a game works, right? You're presented with sort of a situation, and then you resolve it, and then you are rewarded, and then we go back to the front. If resolving those situations if you don't like the way that you resolve the situations, and you don't like the reward that you get for resolving the situation, you're playing the wrong game. So, for example, Pathfinder 2, almost every version of D&D, most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, you are resolving your situations with grid-based tactical combat. If you really enjoy that method of resolution, well, then you're playing the right game. If you don't enjoy that style if you wouldn't go out and play Mech Warrior on tabletop or some Napoleonic war game on your own thing, well, maybe that's not the right game for you. Same thing with the reward. If the way that the game is rewarding you, if you like leveling up, if you like getting stronger, if you like being able to, go from zero to hero and be able to, jump hundreds of feet and rip apart mountains with your bare hands, then maybe you're playing the right game. But if that's not as interesting to you, maybe you should play something else. How long are PbtA sessions usually compared to run PF2? In my experience, they run a lot faster. How long they are? Well, I mean, Pathfinder 2 session can be, as long as you want it to be. Pathfinder 2 could be 3 to 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours. I would say, this game, I think, says the time of a typical session is 2 to 4 hours for root, and I think that's fair. I think probably for me, probably more like 3 to 4 hours is probably pretty reasonable. I think you could play longer than that. I think D20 games tend to, get hung up because you spend so much time in combat. But in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, you can get a lot done because you're not in that grid-based tactical combat. I mean, to be clear, this is true even in older versions of D&D, maybe first edition D&D, where you're not playing with a map and minis and grids. You're still in initiative combat, but you're not counting squares and moving stuff around. It's kind of more fast-paced, crazy. So, I mean, the real time suck in these games is this thing, this grid-based tactical combat. But if you love grid-based tactical combat, then then there's no problem, right? Like, you're playing the right game. You're like, we played Pathfinder 2 the other day, and we spent like 3 hours in grid-based tactical combat. And you're like, you're like, no, dude, I love grid-based tactical combat. That's what I'm here for. It was awesome. And I'm like, good on you. I'm jealous that you are having such a great time. Not jealous. I'm happy for you. But yeah. Close the shop for a weekend and invite the Knights to travel to Menor, Ohio, and run multiple RPGs all weekend and film it all. Well, I mean, Dirt here is speaking, of course, of the mythical NightCon, which hopefully is going to happen. Maybe NightCon 2023? Question. I don't know if we can make it happen, but it would be pretty sweet if we could. So we'll keep that option open. I've floated the idea of Vegas because it's easy to get to, it's cheap to fly to, a lot of direct flights, and of course it is America's playground. But there are other options as well. Maybe we come to the headquarters of Cleveland and make it Midwest like everybody else, more drivable for a lot of more people, but could be pretty fun. Especially if Dirt, by the way, friend of the channel and owner operator of our favorite local game store. So when he says close the shop, he means his game shop. All right, everybody. I think that's going to do it for me. Want to say thank you so very much, incredibly so much, to the awesome, amazing people who kind of came out tonight and watched and supported. If you're watching this on the VOD, thank you for doing what you're doing. I want to say thank you to London, Bill, GM Scott, Chris Hansen, Boothby. I think I said Bill. I said Scott. I said London. For tipping and for super chatting and for showing some support and some love. We are basically 80% of the way to our route, and I'm very excited about it. So that's really cool. And of course, London being top tier level night content, I'm sure this will get almost no views as it tends to be. But the important part is, if I'm talking to you and you've been watching this chat, I want you to know that a lot of these people, in fact, most of these people, are members of the Patreon, the Knights of Last Call Patreon. They are members of that Patreon because they want to be part of a community of like-minded gamers, people who are passionate about playing these games, but also digging deep. They want to learn about games. They want to explore games. They want to talk about games. They want to tinker with it, right? It's the difference between liking cars, cool, and liking engines and building your own and custom detailing your car, right? That is what this Patreon is about. It's about people who want to look under the hood. It's about people who are legitimately interested in passionate about the hobby. And if that sounds interesting to you and you want to be part of this community and you want to be part of one of the largest Pathfinder 2 Patreons out there, but also any RPG, if you want to dig into this stuff, I really, really encourage you to check us out, patreon.com/knightsoflastcall, and give us a look, sign up, show some support, show us some love. If not, subscribe, like, don't miss any other content that we generate here. And just want to say thanks a lot to everybody. Thanks a lot, of course, continuing support to our patrons, to our ever increasing list of super generous people who have tipped and supported us again and again and again, really keeping the lights on, keeping the wheels greased. They are the real hub of this enterprise. So thanks to all of our patrons, thanks to our tippers, thanks to our super chatters, thanks to all our supporters, all of our YouTube members with their sexy badges. And if you're interested in showing us some love, check us out. Patreon.com/knightsoflastcall. Link is in the bottom. And you too,
I am strong.
will be strong.
Strong.
And strong. That's right, London. Strong. That's how we love to do it. All right, so that's going to be it for me. I'm going to be back Thursday. That's right. Thursday at 7 p.m. usually is All Spells Ranked, but this Thursday we're going to have 2 special guests, Mark and Steven from Roll for Combat, and we're going to kind of put Mark in the hot seat here. I'm sure we'll talk about Pathfinder 2 in general, but I kind of want to go behind the curtain here. I want to talk to Mark about what was Pathfinder 2, what were his thoughts? How would he change it? What are some of the problems that he sees in the game? What are some of the problems that we see in the game? And as a game designer, does he think that those problems are real or imagined? How would he deal with those situations? He doesn't work for Paizo anymore, so I'm hoping we can get him to spill the beans. So check us out Thursday, 7 p.m. That's going to be July 14th. But thanks again, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call.